What's going on, everybody? This is Moose and Chris here from OccupyFantasy.com at OccupyFantasy on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. Co-founder and data guru here at Occupy Fantasy. Alongside Chris, had to bring in the old FanDuel backup quarterback strat. At Rooney FFB on Twitter is where you can find him. He's our NFL writer. Dabbles in a little MLB as well, all over the place. What's up, Chris? Glad to have you on.
Yeah, happy to be here. I would like to say, I think, while you're all about rostering these minimum price backup quarterbacks and FanDuel single game slates, I'd like to think that I'd be priced up at least a little bit, make it a little more difficult for you. But
yeah.
In all seriousness, happy to be here. Brian, I guess, has some house guests, due to the holiday, so just unavailable to join the stream today. So I apologize to everybody who's looking forward to hearing what Brian has to say. But the good news for you is, unlike Brian, I'm the one that writes the plug that you read every single Sunday, and so I'm actually going to be here and tell you to actually do the things that we write in the plug, which is nice for a change.
Yeah, and another way I like it, I guess this is going to be shit on Brian hour, but I like the fact that not many people actually 150 max, and Brian always has this instance of he's always 150 maxing things. You're more of a lower risk player. I know you play a lot of DraftKings cash. You do maybe from 20 max here and there, but sometimes it's good to just get different perspective on different playing styles and see what works for you. So
no, exactly.
So let's jump right into it. We're here till 2:30. So if you have questions, go ahead and hit them in the chat. If you're watching this on replay, go ahead and like the video, comment down below with any of your questions, and we'll make sure to get back to you before the slate starts. But Chris, just first overall question, what's your thought about the slate? Do you like it? Do you not like it?
Not sure yet. I haven't really tried to build too much, to be honest with you. Well, obviously I'll be live again tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. to go over final Q&A with everybody who checks that out on Twitter Live. But we're still waiting on news on, I think, a pretty big spot, which is Green Bay Packers running back A.J. Dillon. We do have Aaron Jones, who logged some limited practices this week, so if he returns to their active game day roster, that's obviously going to blow up that play a little bit. I think as of last night, a lot of people around the industry had Dillon as one of the best plays at the running back position, but just kind of looking through some things this morning and even our own model, that you're responsible for, we've kind of downgraded Dillon a little bit just because we're hedging in case Jones is active. So I really want to see what that news item is before I kind of dive too heavily into building something this week.
Yeah, and it's always tough. Go ahead.
I will say, just big picture, 10-game slate, shorter because of the Thanksgiving slate. So this looks a lot like some of the early bye week slates we had back in October. Mm-hmm. And unlike some of those slates where we had, a bunch of double-digit favorites, there's none of those this week. The biggest favorite, I think, is the Patriots playing the Tennessee, whatever's left of the Tennessee Titans. Everything else is inside 5 points, right? So This is interesting. Every game should be competitive. I think it allows us to do a lot more with our lineups.
Yeah, I really like that you pointed out. There's not a lot of big favorites. New England's 7.5, depending on where you look. Everywhere else is 3 or less, and so it really gives you that opportunity where I think bringbacks might do a little bit better this week than other weeks. Hopefully we don't see no 3-0s or 2-0s up top the Millionaire Maker, which means count it, replay, clip this, everything. It's going to be happening probably. But Adam has a question here. He says, what's your thoughts on the Jacksonville-Atlanta game? Both defenses are terrible and have a couple key guys to play on offense.
Yeah, so this is going to be one of those weeks where every game is viable for a stack. It's outside of the ones that I wrote up. I think the ceilings for a lot of the players involved on both sides there aren't super high, but James Robinson in particular with the Jaguars looks like he's going to be one of the most popular players on the slate, I guess, so I could certainly see using him. We like Laviska Shenault. I wrote him up as a value wide receiver this week. He's pretty cheap on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm sure he's cheap on Yahoo as well. I just don't know his salary off the top of my head. So there's a lot of options there. Patterson, the running back, wide receiver, kind of dual threat they have there, he's expected to return, I guess. So that actually makes Atlanta look a little better as well. AJ, I think you'll be on an island versus me if you stack that one. I don't think I'm going to go there, but I see what you're considering. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me is that total opened up at 48. Yeah. It's down to 46, 45 and a half at some spots. But again, as we always say, if you have a reason to like someone, we're not going to shy away from you for playing them. But let's talk about some of the stacks, Chris, that you did write up. If we look here on the Daily Plug that you can check out at occupyfantasy.com. The first stack that you wrote is that Buccaneers-Colts game. Talk to me a little bit about this one.
Never a good thing, I think, for an opposing defense when Tom Brady is projected to face very little defensive pressure. It means he'll have plenty of time to sit back there in the pocket and find whoever's open, which is what he's done for feels like 37 years now. So like the fact that the Bucs have the highest implied team total. There's no weather concerns here because they're playing in Indianapolis. And then obviously on the Indianapolis side, everybody is very familiar with what Jonathan Taylor is capable of. Do you think Michael Pittman's the best receiver to use as well in any lineups where you're stacking this game? It's the highest total on the slate, and it doesn't kind of looking through what our model wants to do and using our lineup builder even to build like 150 max lineup runs, Moose. This game isn't even the most popular one in there, and I feel like that is something that's pretty common around the DFS industry this week. It seems pretty crazy that we have a 53-point total game, I think, at this point, and it's not the one that everyone seems to be on. Like, that makes me really excited to use this one.
Yeah, and it surprised me because I imagine JT's still probably going to get his 10+, 20+% ownership, and so if that game goes off like it's projected to do with the total, and they score 53 points or whatever, you can hope that JT doesn't score all 53 of those points for both sides. And with it being a low-owned stack and a high game total, that's a recipe for success.
Yeah, and just, I guess, cards face up on the table here for everybody. Running through, the kind of optimal stuff in the model, it really wants to stack this Carolina and Miami game. I think that's pretty obvious given the fact that Cam Newton's a little cheap, especially on DraftKings. We know what Christian McCaffrey can do, and then all of the primary weapons on the Miami side are super cheap. The other game that the model wants to stack is Houston and the Jets, and so both of these games, super low totals. I want to say Houston and the Jets is like 44 points. Carolina, Miami is like 42. I think it actually might be down to 41.5. So it just feels like we have an opportunity to completely ignore that in tournaments and play some of the games that the odds makers actually expect to be high scoring and somehow be different than everybody else. I feel like that's the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it at all. They'll definitely be, that'll definitely be in some of my lineups. Adam has another question here. He says, Chris, any thoughts on OBJ's potential snap count for tomorrow?
That's a really tough spot. We do like that game. Obviously, it's the next one on our list here. I think everybody can see it at the bottom of the screen. The Rams at the Packers. Feels like the decision that the Rams themselves make on how to use Odell Beckham is going to massively shift, which high-risk wide receiver is the best one here. We're not going to know until the game kicks off, so that's the rub there. But we do like Van Jefferson a lot. He was one of our underperforming wide receivers this week, getting a lot of targets and air yards for them before they acquired Beckham. In that one game with Beckham they've had so far, Jefferson still played heavily. So right now I do have Beckham listed as the better high-risk option slightly. This is written in the order of my personal preference, just because I think he may come in a little lower owned, and so there's maybe some more upside there. But I do think it's kind of a coin flip thing. What we were told by the reporters before their Monday Night Football game that Beckham played, I think it was Monday. It was either Monday or Sunday night. Kind of irrelevant at this point. Beckham's position was not exactly a perfect match for how they used Robert Woods. This minimum price wide receiver who's questionable tomorrow, Ben Skowronek, was the wide receiver who played a lot in that role. So I kind of feel like it's likely Skowronek could do that again. But again, he's questionable this week. So if he's ruled out, I think it kind of clears things up a little bit.
Yeah, it just seems like, Chris, it just seems like we can't get a week where everything's clear on a Saturday. Right. Where we got to wait till Sunday. We got to wait for those Schefter tweets to come out. It seems like there's always a week where we got to wait for some sort of injury news or something like that.
The easiest thing to do with the Rams is just play Cooper Kupp. I know his price is outrageous, but if you are going to stack this game, try to find ways to get Kupp in there. He's clearly the best weapon on the Rams. So
yeah, absolutely. And then I guess we can just jump to the next the next stack that you wrote up here. Is that Minnesota-San Francisco game? As you talked about, it's the second highest total on the board. It also has some of the best high-ceiling weapons in the NFL on the slate: Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, Deebo Samuel. Anything you want to talk about for this game?
I guess we are still waiting to see what they're gonna the 49ers are gonna do at the running back position. I kind of expect Elijah Mitchell will be back, but he is questionable. So if he's inactive, that obviously puts Jeff Wilson back on the table. Brandon Ayuk finally playing like a real wide receiver role again for them. Had a pretty nice game last week, so he'll be an option. And then, I mean, George Kittle, I think, has scored a touchdown. It feels like every single week that he's played. So pretty concentrated volume on the San Francisco side. Minnesota is this team that I feel like I always write up as a stack option. I feel like they always play very well, and for some reason the field just does not want to stack this team. So it does feel like I didn't write this up as a stack option, and maybe I'll go in and add this after the show here. It does feel like the Chargers and the Broncos actually may be a little more popular. Justin Herbert being one of the most popular quarterbacks for all lineup types this week, wrote him up as a good low-risk play. The Chargers and the Broncos game may actually be a popular stack than this game. That's why I'm talking about it. So that's why I kind of like this Minnesota and 49ers stack even more for that reason. A lot of concentrated volume on both sides, and it feels like it'll go lower round.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, where there's a lot of opportunities with every game being so close in the spread that it almost seems like any game stack is viable this week.
Yeah, a lot of these games, there's not like any super high total games, right? If we remove the Tampa Bay and Indianapolis games. So like everything is viable. Kind of mentioned that when AJ had a question about Jacksonville and Atlanta. These are the options that we like the most. Obviously, our others that we have on here, I talked about Carolina and Miami a little bit as one of these low total games that appears to be popular. Certainly feels like it's worth having some exposure to, just because we're probably going to get crushed if we don't and everybody else has it, Yeah. And then Philadelphia at the Giants is one that I keep gravitating back towards. I actually think Jalen Hertz has the most upside at quarterback this week. And the model loves stacking the Philadelphia side of this game. There's some value on the Giants side with all the receiver injuries that they have. Feels like Saquon Barkley will be a little bit more involved on the ground now that they're not facing, a super tough rush defense. So that's another spot that is kind of interesting here.
Yeah, you talk about that Philly side. That's actually, I think I'm going to be doing that as well. In my rankings, I actually have Philly as the number one side, not necessarily the game, not necessarily the number one game to stack, but the side to stack. So, should be interesting. It seems like a lot of people are going a lot of different ways. But we got some questions here in the chat. David said, "Guys, nice strategy call on Thanksgiving, 4-1 and 4-0 stacks. Bills and Brietta were good plays. Yep, congrats there." Adam says, "And because Minnesota's defense has been horrible, so they're constantly throwing it to catch up. I love it." Yeah, it's always good when your team's behind and they got to throw to get up. Nigel says, "Go ahead. Were you gonna say something?"
No, I was just saying. I mean, Kirk Cousins is also like he's good. Like he's fine. Doesn't feel like anybody really likes Kirk Cousins, but just every single week they have a pretty solid performance. So we're right on the same page there together.
Definitely. Nigel says, "What's up, fellas? Hi, Moose. Hi, Chris. Great job and plug. Keep it coming." Thank you, Nigel. Would you prefer Gesicki or Waddle more as the bring back on the Carolina stack? And I'm thinking Gesicki to use as the tight end spot plus the previously underperforming tight end. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Just wanted to finish.
No, that was fine. Adding on the rest of the question there, I was about to say, tight end is pretty tough every single week. We actually have seen tight end correlate a little better with the game stack in tournament lineups. I want to say the guys over at Numberfire put some stuff out, but how on FanDuel that's happened quite a bit in perfect lineups this year. So I don't hate that at all, using Gesicki in that stack. I think I'll probably have, if I stack that game, like I said, I haven't built my lineups yet, waiting on that A.J. Dillon news before I make any decisions. I feel like I'll end up with a little more Waddle just because he's a pretty reasonably priced wide receiver, and I do think Gesicki's a little bit more expensive at tight end. The way this slate sort of shakes out, it does feel like we're trying very hard to find some cheap tight ends to play, so I may end up on more Waddle, but Gesicki's still a great play.
Okay. Cool. So if you have questions, keep them coming, guys. We're here for another 15 minutes or so. Matthew says, favorite stack and favorite wide receiver for FanDuel. The stacks are written in order on the plug, but Chris, would you say that the Tampa Bay game applies to FanDuel as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the Tampa Bay Indianapolis game is my favorite stack this week. Yeah, on both any website you can play on, just because of the high total. And then our favorite wide receiver on FanDuel, I'll give you that one. It's actually not in that game stack. It's Deebo Samuel with the San Francisco 49ers. He's actually atop our model for wide receivers on FanDuel this week.
Nice. Yeah, Debo is just a god, apparently.
I mean, if they're going to use him as a running back as well, right? It just
Yeah.
his role is insane if that's the case. So
Yeah, I think he actually leads the league in the next gen stats where it's like expected, like the most over expected yards after catch. If I'm saying that correctly, you know what I mean, Chris?
yeah, I do. I mean, Debo's been super efficient. That's sort of he flashed that ability early in his career. He's really flashed much more upside with like a deeper downfield, a higher A dot route tree this year, which I think surprised some people. Very dynamic player. Hard to. There's nothing bad you can say about Deebo Samuel, right? Like he's a good player every single week the way he's being used right now. Like the question that I actually have there from totally not the FBI. I thought this might come up. I have that Philly parentheses 2 to 3. What I mean there is, we do advocate pretty strongly for those 3-1 game stacks here, but I actually think because Jalen Hertz is so involved in their running game that you can get away with just pairing him with one teammate if you want. So that's what I mean by the 2. 3 is fine. Dallas Goedert at tight end is going to be very popular once again, like him in all lineup types this week. Devonta Smith, his favorite wide receiver, always a good option to pair, with Hertz. And then it looks like even Miles Sanders at running back may be a popular play this week. So there's actually quite a few different ways to double stack with Jalen Hurts this week.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. Hog Darkness, what's your thoughts on Ty Johnson?
Do you think he'll be the top running back for the Jets against the Texans this week? Obviously, Tevin Coleman, who we've seen have success in the league before, mostly with the 49ers, is back for the Jets, and he'll be involved in the game plan. For those who don't pay attention to Jets football religiously, can't blame you for that. Michael Carter, who's been their best running back over the last month or so, is going to be out for a little bit here with an ankle injury. So we're expecting Ty Johnson will get the most reps at the position. He's just 4,300 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel. I do think that's an interesting punt option. We have a lot of them though, and so the projected roster percentage for these guys is probably being held in check because they're all sort of taking away from each other because none of them are really great plays. It's Ty Johnson with the Jets is one of them. You have the Texans running backs on the other side of that game. They cut Phillip Lindsay from their roster, so they're down to just Rex Burkhead and David Johnson. I don't necessarily know what to make of that backfield right now. And then we have the Titans, who are the biggest underdogs on the slate, but they let Adrian Peterson go. They're down to just Dontrell Hilliard, who was super involved in the passing game last week, and Donta Foreman at running back. So all those guys very affordable this week, and do think people will be turning to them in tournament lineups for some salary cap relief. Just not sure how it's going to shake out. Do you have a kind of sense for how you want to handle that situation at all, Moose, or have you not really thought too much about it yet?
I haven't really thought too much about it. It's tough, man. I haven't had as much time as I wanted to. I'm going to really have to think about it. I might just put it in the builder and just see what the builder gives me, and then just go from there.
I think that's single line, we're a trust the model kind of outfit here, right? We totally trust the work that you put into that. I will say my lean right now is Dontrell Hilliard with the Tennessee Titans. 10 targets last week from Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, they trust him in the passing game. Had a decent amount of carries as well. I think he played the most snaps in that game because they were trailing against the Texans. They're probably going to be trailing again here against the Patriots. They're the biggest underdogs on the slate. Mm-hmm. They don't really have a lot of none of their starters are available. I think it's maybe Anthony Ferkser at tight end, right? So this is a pretty gross play when you consider how undermanned the Titans are, but especially on DraftKings, if Hilliard can give you 5, 6, 7 receptions and just be efficient with those touches, he's not going to kill you if he gets you like 10 to 12 fantasy points, hopefully more than that. But it does feel like he's got access to a decent floor at a low price this week.
Yeah, no, I can see that, definitely. Ed also says, is Miles Sanders' negative correlation to Hertz? What do you think there, Chris?
Sanders doesn't have any rushing touchdowns this year because Hertz keeps taking them, right? So that is definitely negatively correlated a little bit. If Hertz is rushing down inside the 5 near the goal line, then that's going to affect Sanders' ceiling. That said, he is just 5,100 on DraftKings, 6,100 on FanDuel this week. Like that as a play if we don't have A.J. Dillon available to us. I still feel pretty strongly even though it's maybe a little bit under, looking like it'll be under-owned compared to what we have right now in the model. The Christian McCaffrey, A.J. Dillon, Myles Gaskin trio at running back is my favorite still right now. But if we don't have access to Dillon, if he's going to be splitting touches with Aaron Jones, I'm going to have to be a little more flexible on that.
Okay. Makes sense to me. And then another question from Ed says, are we still looking at mid to low price running backs, or with the emergence of Taylor / McCaffrey, the kings of the field, switching it back to value wide receiver?
An interesting question. I still think value running backs is fine. And it does feel like the field may agree with that. Just sort of looking at how we have it right now. Obviously, McCaffrey is expected to be the most popular running back on DraftKings this week. We have him at 20% of rosters. But behind him, our next, looks like 5 most popular running backs are between $5,100 and $6,300. So, the value running back movement is still here. I don't think it's necessarily going anywhere. We have a ton of priced up wide receivers that have very dynamic roles in their offenses. The league is more pass heavy than it's ever been. I think that's sort of the new meta, as we've talked about, right? We're still going to be looking at these quote unquote chalk wide receivers. Those will be over 15% as probably some of the best plays on the slate. I don't know how you feel about that, Musa, but that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen later and later throughout the year, that these chalk wide receivers are chalk for a reason. It seems like just the way the NFL is playing, wide receivers 15-20%. He's probably a pretty good play, so you should probably play them. There's not really much else to it. Ed here says, calling my shot, Colts to win by 4, and JT's going for 145 and 2. That would be pretty dangerous.
Hey, if you think that, then build some Carson Wentz, Jonathan Taylor stacks for sure. Definitely feels like that will be the more unique side of playing that game this week. We don't actually think Taylor's going to be super popular. I think we have him. We'll give it to you. Why not? I mean, give away some of the stuff for free here. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe to the website. You get all this data at any time that you want to go look at it. But we have Jonathan Taylor at 9% on DraftKings, 10% on FanDuel, and it looks like he's 4, 6, 8, the 10th most popular play on both sites roughly. So yeah, I mean, if you think he's going to hit that ceiling once again here, despite the fact that he just had literally a career day last week, still feels like you'll be able to get him at modest ownership. So a good week to maybe use him in tournaments if you feel that way.
Yeah. What do you think, Chris, about, because I thought when I saw ownership, he's only 9-10% after that game he had last week. I thought that was a little low. And if he wasn't playing as a 7.5 point underdog, I feel like he'd probably be 20%, double what he is now. What do you think?
I think it's McCaffrey. I mean, McCaffrey's projected to be so popular, and it's really hard to play these two guys together, regardless of where you're playing. Because I think everybody's still trying to play some of these, wide receivers that are over, 7,000 on DraftKings roughly, right? So that makes it pretty difficult to play both CMC and Taylor, and then, a Devontae Adams, a Chris Godwin, a Cooper Kupp, right? Like, you just can't get 3 of those guys in your lineup and actually have a good lineup, right? So Taylor looks like a pretty obvious pivot off of McCaffrey in some spots in high risk, for example, for that reason. That's probably the easiest way to get different, is build a lineup that includes Christian McCaffrey in it, but then maybe run it with Jonathan Taylor instead.
Okay, I can see that. And it says a lot of pros are high on Atlanta and New York Jets game, with Jets quarterback high in the model and Texas high Z. Would Jets 3-1 be a good pivot?
With Jets, well, so Atlanta's playing the Jaguars, not the Jets. But I do understand what you're saying. That, Houston is playing the Jets, and I've seen that too. It looks like a lot of the Texans, a lot of people are going to be playing Tyrod Taylor from the Texans, and maybe Brandon Cooks as well, right? Like, I think he's a decent low risk receiver. So let me read that again here. With Jets quarterback high in the model and Texans highest defense, would Jets 3-1 be man, I don't know if I can pull the trigger on a Jets 3-1 personally. I do like Elijah Moore, specifically at wide receiver. His role has grown. They finally, they were using 4 or 5 receivers pretty heavily, rotating them in and out of their formations. But last week, they actually concentrated that volume on just Elijah Moore and Corey Davis, Crowder in the slot still as well. So I still think if you're going to stack that, probably go with the Houston side and maybe use one Jets run back. That's outside of what I'm looking to do here still this week, though.
Okay. Let's see. I was like, Ken, what's up, Ken? He said, what's up, guys? Who is the cheapest running back that you're considering playing on a DraftKings GPP?
Probably right now, considering Dontrell Hilliard. I think he's my favorite cheap one at 4,600 on DraftKings. I'm not sure how I feel yet. I'd like to see maybe some more news from beat reporters before I decide what to do. But Ty Johnson with the Jets at 4,300 would be the other one. Maybe David Johnson from the Texans. But those latter two guys, I'm not actually considering playing them right now. I'm only considering playing Hilliard.
Okay, see that. Yeah, of course, CPAT 6,500 can always be it's more of a mid-price running back, but he can get you there too.
Yeah, and the concern there is he's got an ankle injury, right? I mean, Brian is notorious for talking about that on the show with you. Those high ankle sprains, we're really kind of concerned about that. He's a super high risk for a re-aggravation in the middle of the game. So that's the only thing to be aware of with Patterson. And I appreciate the clarification there. You meant both games are being talked about, Atlanta and the Jets game, Atlanta Jaguars, and then Houston and the Jets. And like I said at the top of the show, to me, that's a reason to actually play some of the actual better games on the slate. It doesn't feel like people want to do that. It feels like people want to play these lower total games involving some of the worst teams on the slate. To me, just taking a step back from that and looking at all the options available, if that means I can get access to some of the better players in the league that are going to be less popular for some reason, I'm going to try and do that.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense. Let's see here. So we're all caught up on questions. We've got just a couple minutes left. Chris, is there anything that we missed that you want to talk about or anything like that?
Not really. I think the slate is pretty interesting this week. Like I said, a lot of options. You can be different literally just by focusing on some of these higher total spots. So it doesn't feel like the field is doing that this week. Probably the hardest play to get away from when he's going to be as popular as he's going to be is Christian McCaffrey. I do think it would be unwise to have like a full fade there. So that's maybe one thing to consider if you haven't built anything yet. But other than that, you can really do pretty much anything you want this week.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, so fool around with it. If you're building even just a handful of lineups, I would definitely check out the Occupy Fantasy Lineup Builder powered by DFS Magic. Like I say, if you're hand building just a couple lineups, you can hand build up to 20, save them all, so you can come back, fool around with whatever you need to do. And if you're building multiple lineups, you can use the optimizer, and you can use slate groups to say, hey, these three stacks, I'm stacking the 3 games from the plug, and you can create a whole new slate group while having that old one saved, and you say, maybe I don't want to stack the 49ers, maybe I want to stack Philadelphia some more. You can go ahead and play around with that. So yeah, definitely check that out. Adam says, did we end up using Dallas and Survivor? Yes. Thank you, Adam. I was hoping we would go the whole stream without having to say it. Thank you. Just dug the knife in a little bit more. Ed says, what are your thoughts on Mac Jones if Stevenson and Harris are out?
Are we I mean, I know they're both questionable. I actually saw that come in and I was double checking the injury report. I don't know if we're actually expecting that though. I think we'll definitely have at least one of them. Regardless, here's what I would say about Mac Jones. I'm just double checking something here on my side. Mac Jones is not really a high ceiling quarterback in fantasy football. Mm-hmm. We've seen one game with more than 20 fantasy points on DraftKings, or on FanDuel, obviously, right, from Mac Jones. This is still a pretty conservative approach from the Patriots. I do think if the Titans are as limited as we expect them to be, they'll continue to run the football primarily. I'm not sure Mac Jones is somewhere that I want to go this week, personally.
Okay, let's see that. Adam says, my bad. Yeah, it's fine. That's all good. Cool. So I think that does it. Chris, any did I miss anything else or?
I'll be back. I'll be live on the Occupy Fantasy Twitter account at 11 a.m. for a Q&A. Make sure on mobile, that's the only place you can ask questions because for whatever reason, Twitter Live is dumb like that. But we'll be there ready for you to kind of talk through final decisions by then. I think I'll have a lot of what I want to do finalized. Obviously, a lot of the news will be in by then, and whatever else we're waiting on will break as we're ending the show. So we'll be able to clarify it for you in there as well. Keep an eye on the plug. We'll make sure that we update that for any news that we get overnight here as well from like those Schefter and Rappaport news dumps.
Absolutely, yep. So until next time, Chris and Moose from OccupyFantasy.com. Have a good one.